Chair Abreu, myself, and our colleagues, which requires the Mayor's Office to prevent gun violence to work collaboratively with NYPD to study and report on illegal transportation of firearms to New York City. I do want to take a brief moment to address yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, which struck down a New York State law that placed restrictions on carrying concealed handguns. Despite the court's ruling, this legislative body will continue to prioritize public safety and reduction of gun violence within New York City. Let me be clear. The answer to worsening gun violence epidemic is not to allow unfettered carry of handguns, and we should not allow it to propagate further. As we approach the summer months, New York City continues to be plagued by gun violence. Lives of heartbroken families and victims of gun violence are forever altered. Gun violence is the most pressing issue our city faces, and we must continue to do everything we can to stop it. Earlier this spring, the Committee on Public Safety had held an oversight hearing on the Mayor Adams' blueprint to end gun violence, during which we examined the administration's vision for achieving improved public safety and reducing gun violence. These proposals focus on curbing gun violence epidemic and expanding community-based solutions to crime. I look forward to hearing an update from the administration regarding the implementation of the various proposals put forth to stem the flow of guns into the city and examine the results that we have achieved thus far. In doing so, I'm particularly interested in exploring the collaborative efforts that we must undertake to ensure city, state, and federal governments are working in tandem to address what is truly a national issue with devastating impacts across the country. I will allow Chair Abreu to speak further on Intro 518, but I view this as a vital step in comprehensively studying, tracking, and reporting on the flow of illegal guns. With that, I look forward to hearing from the administration and the public testimony, and I will turn to Chair Abreu for his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hanks. Good morning. My name is Sean Abreu, and I am Chair to the Committee on State and Federal Legislation. I'd like to thank everyone joining us today, especially my colleague, Councilmember Hanks, for co-chairing this joint hearing. Today, we'll be discussing a topic that affects so many people, not only in this great city, but across our nation. Just yesterday, despite countless mass shootings, the Supreme Court struck down a New York law that puts restrictions on carrying guns outside the home, citing that it was at odds with the Second Amendment. It is clear now, more than ever, that despite New York's long-standing efforts to regulate guns, the fight is far from over. Access to firearms is a large part of the conversation surrounding gun violence in our communities. At the forefront of this topic is curbing the flow of these weapons from out of state. Recognizing the importance of stemming illegal flow of out-of-state firearms into New York City, much attention has been given to local, state, and federal efforts needed to target illegal trafficking of firearms along the so-called Iron Pipeline. The Iron Pipeline generally refers to the trafficking of firearms to New York along the I-95 interstate corridor, purchased from states with lenient firearm regulations, such as Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. A recent report from the New York State Attorney General's office found that 70% of likely trafficked guns seized in New York originated from one of the above-mentioned states. Today, we will be hearing Intro 518, a bill that I recently introduced along with Chair Hanks in an effort to take action against this problem. I'm glad to see the general positive reception in the testimony that I just glanced pretty quickly. This bill would require the Mayor's Office to Prevent Gun Violence to coordinate with the police department to conduct a study and submit a report on the illegal transportation of firearms. The study and report would need to identify the locations where firearms have been seized or surrendered in the city, and specifically, the locations where firearms that have been connected to a crime have been seized or surrendered in the city, including the type of firearm, the manufacturer of the firearm, and whether the firearm is a ghost gun or a 3D printed firearm. The study and report would also need to identify the ways states and municipalities coordinate to prevent the illegal transportation of firearms, recommendations for states and municipalities to increase collaboration to prevent the illegal transportation of firearms, and recommendations for federal, state, and municipal policies to prevent the illegal transportation of firearms. I want to emphasize that a crucial part of what we're looking to learn more about today is just how information the NYPD already collects on illegal seizures, as well as gaining a better understanding of what does or does not get published and why. Not only is it important for this study and report to inform lawmakers of trends and patterns, it is imperative that we use this information to keep making improvements on the way we coordinate the prevention of illegal access to dangerous weapons. I'd like to thank all my colleagues that have joined us today, as well as committee staff Jayshree Ganapathy, William Diori, and Hector Hilmang. I'd also like to thank my staff, Jaleesa Quigley. I will now turn it to Josh Kingsley.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm Josh Kingsley, Counsel to the Committee on Public Safety, and I'll be moderating this hearing. We're going to be doing a hybrid hearing, so both in person and there are going to be members participating via Zoom. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that you'll be on mute until you're called on, and that's for council members and members of the public on the Zoom. During the hearing, I'll be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called, and I'll be periodically announcing who is the next panelist. At this hearing, we'll be first inviting testimony from the New York Police Department and the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, and then from members of the public. I will now call on members of the administration to testify. We'll be hearing from the NYPD and the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. For Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, we'll hear from Deanna Logan, Molly Slothwire, and Karina Christensen. And then for NYPD, it will be Director Nicole Berkovich, Deputy Inspector John Hall, and Director Michael Clark. Before we begin, I'll ask the folks to raise your hand and affirm this following oath. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before these committees, and to answer honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Great, thank you. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Hanks, Chair Abreu, and members of the council. I'm Deputy Inspector John Hall, the Executive Officer of New York City Police Department's Office of Crime Control Strategies. I'm joined here today by Michael Clark, the department's Director of Legislative Affairs, and Nicole Berkovich, the Director of the NYPD's Legal Division, or License Division, as well as Director Deanna Logan from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. On behalf of Police Commissioner Keechant Sewell, we are pleased to testify the NYPD's effort to keep deadly illegal firearms off our streets and to discuss the bill being heard today. While we return to our familiar pre-pandemic way of life, we are nonetheless confronted by some familiar challenges. At the top of that list is the epidemic of shootings in our streets, driven by the surplus of illegal guns, nearly all of which come from out of state. According to the most recent data kept by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, of the 3,639 guns recovered in New York City in 2021, where a source state could be traced, only 147, or 4%, were from New York State, while 2,785, or 76.5%, were from Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, the top 9 source states that year, with the remainder coming from other states. In 2020, the top 9 source states accounted for 77.1% of recovered guns in New York City, and in 2019, the top 10 accounted for 74.7%. But it's not just New York City. In New York State as a whole, 81.4% of the guns traced were from out of state. In Massachusetts, 78.8% of the guns were from out of state. In New Jersey, it's 82.6%. In Washington, D.C., it's 96.3%. This is a national issue. While we continue to battle the scourge on our city streets, more work must be done on a national level to disrupt and stem the flow of illegal firearms into our cities. So far in 2022, the NYPD has taken over 3,000 illegal guns off our streets, including 175 ghost guns. The emerging threat of ghost guns in our city is also cause for alarm. In all of 2018, the NYPD seized just 17 ghost guns. But that number increased to 50 in 2019, 150 in 2020, and 275 in 2021. And we are on pace to exceed that number of seizures this year. But no matter how many guns we seize, there are people ready to bring more into our city. More guns on our streets mean these guns will be used more often. 67% of our murders in the city are committed with a gun. In 2019, it was 50%. After a steady decrease in gun-involved robberies in recent years, we saw a 61% increase in armed robberies from 2021 to 2022. And we saw a 112% increase in armed robberies from 2020 to 2022. This trend is alarming and directly correlated to the increase in the availability of illegal guns. Because of the nature of the problem facing us, the work done in coordination with our state and federal law enforcement partners and prosecutors is the linchpin in our efforts to stem the flow of guns coursing through what has been referred to as the iron pipeline. The path along the eastern quarter of the United States, often I-95, which brings these guns from states with lax gun laws into states and metropolitan areas with much stricter and much more effective gun regulations. These partnerships take many forms. We work with our federal and state partners in a variety of task forces designed to reduce gun violence, including the Joint Firearms Task Force, the Violent Gangs Task Force, the Joint Organized Crime Task Force, the New York Metro Safe Streets Task Force, to conduct investigations into and prosecutions of gun traffickers and those who cause violence on our streets. Every day, we bring together over 20 federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies and prosecutors as part of the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership to identify trigger pullers and to ensure that every lever of the criminal justice system is engaged in their case. Our Gun Violence Suppression Division conducts investigations into our most violent individuals and criminal groups. The goal of their work is to help solve homicides and non-fatal shootings and bring those willing to fire a gun in our city to justice. Long-term investigations are also conducted by the Firearms Suppression Section, which builds complex cases against those trafficking and using firearms and works with our local and federal prosecutors in these often complex prosecutions. So far this year, the unit has been responsible for the recovery of 275 firearms as a result of the successful execution of search warrants, undercover and confidential informant gun buys, well outpacing 2021 numbers. Our youth coordination officers and our neighborhood coordination officers work with members of the community to stop gun violence before it begins, and the crisis management system, which the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice will speak about, provides critical tools to help stem the tide of violence. However, the law enforcement community and our community partners cannot do this work alone. We need Congress to act to help stop the never-ending influx of illegal guns from states with lax to nearly non-existent regulations. We need to stop people from possessing deadly firearms without being licensed, without background checks, without waiting periods, and without any record of a sale when they are not done by a federally licensed firearm dealer. All of this is currently legal in many places and allows the trail of a gun to go cold, making it extremely difficult for us to identify who is trafficking guns into our city. These loopholes allow the weapons to enter the city, weapons which are too often used to mow down people in gang turf wars, peaceful worshipers in their places of worship, people simply trying to buy groceries, and school children sitting in class. Sadly, even if we are able to interdict every gun coming into New York City, we must recognize there's an unacceptable amount of illegal guns already here. That is why it is critical that we continue to use precision policing to identify and arrest those who carry illegal guns, and the criminal justice system must be recalibrated to allow judicial discretion to hold those dangerous few in custody pending trial. In short, there must be consequences and accountability for carrying and using illegal firearms if we are to make any real headway in ending the cycle of gun violence. I would also like to talk about the bill being heard today, Intro 518. This bill would require the Mayor's Office to Prevent Gun Violence to coordinate with the NYPD to study and report on the illegal transportation of firearms. The department supports the intent of this bill and agrees that it is vital to track the flow of guns into our city. And we look forward to working with the council as to the most effective way to report the information called for in the bill. We would also note that much of the data is data collected and reported by the ATF and is subject to certain federal legal requirements. We look forward to further discussions with the council and the law department on how best to report certain data. The bill also contemplates that the study and report includes reviews and recommendations regarding how guns are illegally transported into the city and ways to reduce gun trafficking and violence. And I will defer to my colleagues at MOCJ to speak further on those provisions of the bill. Thank you, and we look forward to answering your questions. I'll now hand it over to Director Logan.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Hanks. First time in person, so I'm just thankful for that. Good morning, Chair Brew, and members of the Committee on Public Safety and the committees on the state and federal legislation. My name is Deanna Logan, and I am grateful to be here this morning with my colleagues from the NYPD. Also with me today are Molly Slothauer and Karina Christensen, members of our Atlas and Research Programming. MOCJ advises Mayor Adams on criminal justice policy and is the mayor's representative to the courts, district attorneys, defenders, and state criminal justice agencies, among others. MOCJ works with law enforcement, city agencies, not-for-profits, foundations, and the public to implement effective strategies that make the city safer by improving system coordination. MOCJ brings together community and institutional stakeholders to address systemic issues that undermine the safety and stability of our neighborhoods. We strive to move our city forward by providing better resources and access to supports needed to promote and maintain healthy communities for all New Yorkers. Our office is committed to implementing Mayor Adams' vision for a safe and fair city for all New Yorkers. MOCJ's teams work along a public safety continuum that supports the healthy neighborhoods that create safety. Recognizing the interconnected and holistic nature of public safety in historically disinvested communities that also experience the brunt of over-policing and heightened levels of gun violence, in December 2019, the city launched the Office of Neighborhood Safety. In 2021, we were grateful to this body for codifying that office, whose primary task is the primary unit tasked with addressing the root causes that challenge public safety. ONS is housed within MOCJ and is a crucial component of the public safety continuum and is a necessary part of our efforts to co-produce public safety in partnership with local communities. ONS combines efforts from the Mayor's Action Plan, which is also referred to as MAP, the Office to Prevent Gun Violence, which is referred to as OPGV, and Atlas, to share resources and holistic assistance for New Yorkers affected by violence. ONS's teams work with our network of residents and community leaders to ensure that more New Yorkers have the agency and ability to define public safety directly for themselves. As such, ONS relies on the strength and experience and expertise of community as guiding principles and is committed to ensuring that marginalized communities have access to capital and opportunities. As part of the launch of ONS, Atlas was created to build on the foundations that MAP and OPGV approach to foster deep relationships, investment resources, and provide support for people hardest to reach in the criminal justice continuum. Given these initiatives' goals of enhancing safety, Atlas, OPGV, and MAP serve overlapping populations in the city's highest crime neighborhoods. All three programs are housed within ONS and are part of a larger effort to reduce violence and prevent and minimize criminal justice involvement by addressing the root causes of violence that have disproportionately impacted ONS's serviced communities. ONS's programs and initiatives operate on a spectrum that flows from the broader environments to the community and then down to the individual. I will share a few more details about MAP, Atlas, and OPGV's portfolios. Starting with MAP, which was launched in July 2014 following a spike in shootings in some of the city's public housing developments. Over the past 7 years, MAP has become an internationally recognized model for how residents co-create safety in their communities through innovative problem solving. Its signature initiative, Neighborhood Stat, or NSTAT, brings together residents, community stakeholders, and city agency representatives to identify and solve public safety and quality of life issues. Residents take the lead in safety realization efforts through partnerships with community organizations and various city agencies, including the Police Department, Parks Department, Department of Aging, NYCHA, and the Department of Sanitation. In addition to our local NSTAT, MAP sites also conduct this work citywide in an annual summit that results in actionable priorities for NYCHA developments across the city. MAP sites across the city have experienced substantive drops in crime over the last 5 years, as compared to similar sites without the program. OPGV, also launched in 2014, works to address gun violence through a shift in social norms and the work of community members in mediating disputes to prevent shootings. The Crisis Management System, or CMS, deploys teams of credible messengers, community members whose backgrounds allow them to connect with and motivate at-risk individuals to 29 sites where they implement Cure Violence model of mediating conflicts on the street and direct New Yorkers to services that can create peace, provide mental health services, trauma counseling, and other opportunity-centered resources. This initiative has brought measurable benefits to communities citywide. Researchers found that across CMS sites, shooting victimizations fell by 28% over the first 24 months following a site launch, compared to the 24 months prior to the launch, with gun injuries down 33%. Researchers also found that CMS increased trust in police and decreased residents' reliance on violence to settle disputes. The administration continues to increase and improve its commitment to innovative programming that enhances safety within communities. Our Atlas component seeks to address the risks and the needs of individuals released pre-trial on their own recognizance who are at heightened risk of future victimization or justice system involvement. The program offers participants therapeutic services to address past trauma, mentorship, education, and employment opportunities, and entry into supportive community networks. Atlas's therapeutic services engage entire families in order to strengthen family bonds and reduce future justice system involvement. In looking at Intro 518, it would require OPGV to work with NYPD to obtain a better understanding of the flow of firearms in the city by reviewing and submitting a report on the illegal transportation of firearms. While we support the goals of this legislation, it is important to note that OPGV, as a part of ONS, is dedicated to applying upstream solutions to public safety, as well as crisis management when an act of violence occurs. By contrast, the broader MOCJ research and policy team has supervised similar studies in the past and would be best equipped to conduct the study and report as the legislation envisions. We look forward to discussing the bill further and working with the council and our colleagues at NYPD to refine the provisions. Thank you for the opportunity of coming before you and presenting this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before I get into the next line of questioning, I would just like to acknowledge the council members that are here today. Councilmember Holden, Councilmember Areola, Councilmember Della Rosa, Joseph, Majority Whips Brooks Powers, and joining us virtually, Councilmember Tiffany Caban. So I'd like to, and Farrah Lewis, good morning. So I'd like to start by re-examining the components of the Mayor's Blueprint to End Gun Violence. I very much appreciate all of your testimony. So regarding the expanding partnership between NYPD and state police, what information is currently shared between NYPD and state police, if any?
Sure. So there are a few avenues where we work with state police. We have a state trooper who's assigned to work out of one police plaza, and he is a person who can be a liaison between our two agencies. They're also a part of the Gun Violence Strategic Partnership, which is a daily meeting that we do. It includes NYPD, it includes local prosecutors, federal prosecutors, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and federal law enforcement. And that is a daily meeting regarding gun violence, shooters in the city, people who had recently been arrested for carrying a gun, some of the most dangerous people in our city. Additionally, the state police run a couple of working groups, one of which is a 9-state consortium. It includes most of the northeastern states, us, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and I think maybe the rest of the New England states. That's not a daily meeting, but we are meeting with them in that group with the larger states to share information, share intelligence, best practices, and then there's also a group the state police runs that is a intrastate, so it's New York State law enforcement agencies meeting, and again, it's sharing information and sharing tactics and, you know.
During your testimony, NYPD testified, what data may be withheld? I know you mentioned that there's some information that may not be shared. So can we have an idea of specifically what some of the things that would not be shared?
Sure, and I think the big thing is in the bill, it requires us to report on every gun, and much of the data that's required in this report is ATF data. And federal law, it's called the T-Hart Amendments, prohibit the ATF and then anyone who gets the data to report on individual gun levels. There's some provisions for the ATF to report aggregate level data, which they do, and some of that data they publish on their website, and it's what kind of guns, where they came from on their trace reports. But in terms of each individual gun, the federal law would make it difficult, or if not, prevent us from being able to report that.
Okay, thank you. What information does NYPD intend to share that is not currently shared with state police, and why has this information not been shared previously?
I mean, I think at this point, we're pretty good about data sharing with them.
Right now, we do actively share data with the state police, and there's no asks in either direction.
And I think these partnerships have really helped make sure that we're in constant communication. And you know, this isn't new. Obviously, in order for multiple law enforcement agencies to police in a city, we have to be in communication with each other. And we've been part of the task force for years, and there's always been a constant stream of communication. But these dedicated meetings can be really helpful in sharing the information as well. But the boots on the ground, so to speak, you know, there are people who could just pick up the phone and talk to each other. That's always been the case. And sort of trying to share information and share information. Part of it is we don't want to step on each other's toes, right? If they have an investigation and we get a lead, we want to make sure we're working together on it. And part of it is to make sure that we're all have the information we need.
Thank you. So, I mean, so we know, and I appreciate that, you know, there are daily meetings, local, state, federal partners that share intelligence and information on specific cases, but for the purpose of letting the public know, what are the current scope of the department's gun violence strategic partnerships? What other jurisdictions and partners are currently involved, and how is that sharing of information lead to successful investigation, arrest, and prosecution of gun traffickers?
So I don't have the complete list of involved entities. We can get that for you. But I've attended these meetings. The New York State Police are present, the ATF, the FBI, the DEA. We have a representative from each prosecutor's office for all of the counties in New York. We have, obviously, the NYPD intelligence divisions present there. We occasionally have visitors from other agencies, like last time I was there, the Connecticut State Police had a representative there. And the purpose of that is to discuss the events of the first thing that they do is discuss the events of the prior day. They talk about people who were arrested, if there's any sort of, it's only priority people that we're discussing. And we make sure that all of our work is deconflicted, that other people don't have investigations into those people, and then we share any information that's relevant to any investigations that they do have ongoing.
How many arrests has this this partnership? How successful is it in your opinion? And anything that needs to be done further to make it even more successful?
So that's something that we're continuously looking at, trying to refine it and improve it. We are in the process of evaluating the impact of it, and that's something that we do. They typically talk about a couple of arrests a day, but those things can spawn larger investigations into the gun violence and gun trafficking. So I don't have an exact number for you right now, but it is something that we look at and we try to improve.
We definitely would like to follow up on that. Thank you. So we're going to move over to regarding like spot checks for gun trafficking at city entry points. According to the blueprint, the state police and NYPD will implement spot checks at entry points such as Port Authority and/or other bus and train stations. My question is, how will individuals be identified for spot checks? Will there be random spot checks, targeted spot checks? Will demographics and outcomes of such stops be publicly reported?
So I think, what we're doing is when we work with our partner agencies and even on our own, we're following where the intelligence goes, following where our leads go. It's not random checks. It's not that. It's when we get information that we believe someone might be coming in with a gun, then we're going to try and interdict those people. And we'll work with our partner agencies to do that. But I think it's mostly intel-based rather than, random.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So that would lead me to the next question of, thus far, have there been the demographics of individuals searched at such locations? Have efforts been made to protect against the increased potential for racial profiling?
So I don't have that number. We can try and find that out. I think the goal is certainly not, we're not looking to be racially profiling. It's against our policy. It is, again, when we get information, it's really targeting towards people we believe from either informants or undercovers or wiretaps have bringing in guns.
Thank you. So what evidence is there that guns are being trafficked through public transportation facilities as compared to private vehicles? Does the department have any data supporting the belief that this approach will successfully drive down gun violence in the city?
So guns are trafficked into the city by all manner of conveyance. They do come through public transportation. We get that information from informants. We get that information from wiretaps, from actual cases. But they also come in through rental vehicles, private cars. Any manner of conveyance, guns are trafficked into the city. Typically, the numbers of guns that come in at any given time can vary, but it's usually small numbers of guns. And the trafficking isn't necessarily concentrated on one or two people. It's very diffuse into the city. So as far as specific data, we do not have exact statistics on what percentage of guns come in what way. One of the concerns that we have with putting any numbers on something like that is we don't know what we don't know. So, and guns that we don't interdict, we really can't tell you how they're coming in. But
Okay.
we do know they come in through a variety of ways.
So effectively saying that targeted stops and, not really spot checks or checkpoints as it's characterized in the blueprint.
So far, the interdictions that we've been doing this year have been based on credible information, yes.
Excellent, thank you. So Staten Island is connected, I'm from Staten Island, is connected to surrounding areas by 4 bridges, and so the trafficking of guns into the city through those bridges is of significant concern to me. Will spot checks, or as you would say, targeted checks, include motorists at bridge and tunnel entrances to NYC, and how will these targeted checks be conducted? And what role does seaports play in guns coming into New York City, and will spot checks be targeted to be conducted at the seaport?
So again, I think, if the intelligence leads us that someone's coming through Staten Island with guns, obviously we'll seek to interdict that. I don't know. I think the majority of where the guns that we have information is coming up through buses and private automobiles. But we obviously have port security as well that we're, looking to prevent any guns or explosives from coming into the city. But, I don't know of any plans for spot checks right now or vehicle checkpoints in Staten Island. But I think if we have information that's coming from Staten Island, we'll go there and try and get the gun.
Thank you. That concludes my first round of questioning. I'm going to pass it along to Chair Abreu.
Thank you, Chair Hanks. So I'm going to ask a set of questions. I'll first begin with the city's collaboration with state and federal entities. So I'll start broadly. What information does NYPD or MOCJ already share with state officials and federal officials?
We do conduct data sharing with the New York State Police. Like we mentioned earlier, any specific case-related information that leaves New York City, we let them know about. We also let them know about information within New York City where their jurisdiction overlaps. As far as any other state entities,
We also, I mean, there's arrest data is shared with DC, or the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and ultimately the FBI. So they're getting our individual arrest level, but in terms of intelligence and what's going on with individual cases, we're sharing them through our task forces, through our meetings. You know, I'm not saying every case is, because, you know, there are cases where an NYB team is running or an FBI team is running. There is a system to make sure that we don't step on each other's toes. But it is a lot of data sharing through these meetings and agreements.
So other than arrest, can you characterize any other sense of information you share to the state or the federal government?
yes. Well, when we're working a case, like with our federal partners, like the Joint Firearms Task Force, we'll share data related to within the boundaries of the MOU that we have with them.
Do you share, like, do you go more into the arrest, the type of the guns, or?
Oh.
I'm just trying to see, like, what nature of information is provided. You have to get into the specifics of the case, but what is the category of information that is shared?
Well, we work side by side with them, so it's the equivalent of we're working in the same office with them. So it's what they know in terms of those investigations, we know, and vice versa.
Okay, respectfully, I think that's very broad, but I'll move on. What information does NYPD or MOCJ receive from state officials and federal officials? Receive.
So, I mean, I think in the same sharing back and forth, we certainly get, when we submit guns for traces from the ATF, they provide us with the trace information. I think that's a big one. Otherwise, it's again the sharing of information related to our investigations, and it could be the arrest, it could be, you know, who we think was involved in a shooting, who we think is running guns or drugs into the city. So it could be very granular details, but in terms of like that, I think the trace information from the ATF is probably the biggest.
As part of the trace information, do we have any information on the dealership level or the manufacturer level?
Yes. Yeah, we do.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So you were mentioning before that there are certain federal legal requirements that prevents some disclosure of information under 518. My question to that is, does ATF specifically limit the information that NYPD can share with the council or the public?
So I think that the law, not necessarily ATF itself, but the law specifically limits what we could then share from the data they give us.
Which law?
It's called the T-Hart Amendments. It's part of the federal appropriation bills that they pass every year.
And which specific aspect of that law prohibits the information limits your ability to distribute that information to us so that we can do our due diligence to make sure that is in fact the case, that you are limited in providing that information?
Yeah, I mean, we can send you guys the provisions. It's not like U.S. Code 92. It is in the budget bills every year, so I can't give you a...
Yes. So Chair Brew, I do know that when you did your opening, you referenced some work that had been done by the AG's office, right? And I think that's the report that was done in 2018. And that report in and of itself also shows in their methodology the fact that the ATF was limited in the information that they give them on a granular level. So in terms of being able to go back to the manufacturer, that is specifically prohibited. That data is not released. I think some of the data is data that is allowable for the U.S. attorney to have in connection with criminal investigations, but it doesn't necessarily go down to state officials. And because of that, there's a lot of aggregate information and things that we can look at, but the granular level of data, the ATF is not going to give, and they didn't actually give it to the AG's office in that report on, I think it was June 13, 2016, when they gave them the data that they asked for, and in the methodology, they specifically explain why they had much more macro data to work with, and how they cleaned it, and how they got to all of the statistics that you cited in terms of the 70%. And we at MOCJ had done a similar study with NYPD seizures between 2010 and 2015. We could, work with the council and NYPD to really figure out what information is publicly available, and ATF has been very cooperative in a lot of the meetings. That 10 a.m. meeting, they are making sure that they are there, they're working with. So I do believe that there's a way to get to some of the goals here. I don't know that we'll be able to
I
get
think
to
a
the
big part of the
specifics.
goal here is to get the dealership information from ATF, and I don't want to ignore that fact. And so I guess, is ATF itself, not any other entity, is ATF itself prohibited from giving information? Does ATF itself, is there some sort of agreement with the council that limits your ability to give us that information and make it public? That is my question.
So my understanding is that TAHART prohibits ATF from giving out firearm trace data. It requires the FBI to destroy all approved gun purchase records within 24 hours. It prohibits ATF from requiring gun dealers to even submit their inventory information to ATF. There are definitely things within that amendment that frustrates our ability.
See, that's the part I'm confused about. If ATF is prohibited from giving firearm tracing, then how are you receiving this information?
So there's some information that we are allowed to get specifically for a law enforcement investigation purposes, and that alone. Right?
Okay.
It can't then become a public report from that thing. So we're limited on what we can do with that. We're limited to the four walls of the investigation of using
Okay.
it.
So if so what type of information does it limit then? Can you characterize that information and characterize the information you are receiving from ATF, and also characterize the information that you, for whatever reason, are not receiving from ATS?
Okay, so it is my understanding that we can give aggregate data. We can analyze the data and give you summary statistics related to the data, like the fact that 96% of our crime guns are from out of state. By summarizing that data, we can tell you the top source states, that kind of thing. What was the second part of the question?
If you could characterize information that you are limited from sharing with us, or the public.
So we do get incident level trace data. So we get, like you said, the dealers. We get the federal firearm licensee. We get the purchaser. Sometimes it's complete, sometimes it's not. I think that's just a function of the data. We can, from my understanding, aggregate that data and provide summary statistics on it, but I think that is the limit.
Okay, and if it is in fact prohibited, right, would the administration support the advocacy of federal law to change that so that you can have that information so we'll be able to share it to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's been a focus of a lot of gun control groups to get that law passed. Repealed. The law to repeal it passed. I don't think we would oppose that at all.
We definitely think it's important to understand what's happening in our city with the influx of guns, and data helps us understand that. So I think we would agree to that.
Yeah.
All right. Now, moving on from that, just to ask, you kind of already sort of got to it at some point today in one way or another, but perhaps not to everything I'm asking here on gun trafficking trends. Do you have any statistics about the origins of guns that are surrendered and seized in the city? I know you went into that somewhat in your opening.
Yeah, so I do have some statistics to kind of put trafficking into context in the city. The ATF considers a short time to crime as a proxy for the likelihood that a gun was trafficked. So time to crime is the time between the purchase of the gun to the time that it was received in New York City. In 2019, the average time to crime for a crime gun in New York City was 12.3 years. In 2020, it went down to 7 years. So
7 years?
yeah, 7 years. Just to further expound upon that, in 2021, we recovered 228 traceable guns within 3 months of their purchase from out of state. In 2019, that number was 71. So just based on that, we know that trafficking has increased in the city.
Yep. And where are firearms being trafficked from? I know you went into that in your opening.
Georgia's the top source state.
We have that Virginia,
Yep.
South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida,
Yep.
Alabama, Pennsylvania, Ohio.
Makes sense. And do you know who is transporting the firearms? You don't have to get into specifics of the person, although it may be public, but what is who is it, who's transporting it, and are they coming in large quantity or small loads?
They come in a variety of different means, and they also come by a variety of different numbers. The average incident, the average trafficker is bringing in a small number of firearms at a given time. Like I said before, trafficking isn't concentrated among just a few people. There are multiple people trafficking small amounts of firearms, and that's one of the most common. We do see big numbers on occasion, but definitely the modal trafficker is trafficking a few guns at a time.
Would you say there's more guns coming in larger quantities or in smaller loads, or you can't say it?
It's smaller quantities.
Okay, and obviously we have to define what smaller quantities mean, right? And how are they getting here, mode of transportation?
Like we said earlier, it's the bus. The bus is popular, private cars, as well as rental autos. We can't really put numbers on the frequency of relative frequency.
A lot of it
each.
can be tracked, right? So I understand that. Who is selling firearms? Is it mostly as a trafficker or intermediary?
So the majority of the average time to crime in New York City in 2020 was 7 years. So most of the guns were already there. Most of the guns that were used in crimes in New York City were already there. We have brokers. There are what we call brokers in the boroughs that just know how to find things and know how to get guns for other people. So that's one of a common intra-city method of selling guns. But we also, like I said, we saw an influx in trafficking, so we do have straw purchasers and stolen guns coming up the iron pipeline.
Where specifically?
Like I said, Georgia's
Okay.
top source state.
Got it. It would be helpful to know where the concentration of these dealers are along this iron pipeline, but it's something we can, try to ascertain a little later. When an individual is arrested with a firearm, what investigative measures are taken to track the origins of the gun? Is state and federal law enforcement included in the investigation on a regular basis?
Well, we trace every gun that we recover if it's traceable. The ATF has given us access to their e-trace system, so that's how we do it. The ATF and the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership is aware of a lot of the gun arrests that happen in the city, if not all.
So I don't have a lot of familiarity of how this would work. Can you walk me through the steps?
So when a gun arrest is made and we can trace that gun based on the serial number, we find out where it comes from. The ATF might actually run it themselves at the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership. If there's any gun that has a short time to crime, I don't know what their exact threshold is now, but that's what is a good indicator that it was recently trafficked, and that'll kick off an investigation. If that investigation goes anywhere, or if it starts to spawn, then they'll refer it to the Joint Firearms Task Force.
I'll kick it back to Chair Hanks. I do have a second round of questions.
Thank you, Chair Abreu. Do we have any of my colleagues that have questions? Councilmember Holden?
Thank you, Chairs, and thank you for your testimony. I'm sorry I was going back and forth. I missed some of it. We have a press conference outside on, against Asian hate. But I have a few questions, and I'm sorry if I ask a question that you already answered, but I believe in checkpoints. When we were fighting crime, and I remember the bad old days of New York City, when thousands of people were getting killed a year. And it was really an effect of checkpoints were started at particular areas of the city. Yes, it was intrusive. It was a little, people who were law-abiding got caught, in maybe long lines, but it actually did, it really stopped the flow of guns for at least the most part in New York City, I thought. But I would start, here's what I would start, because we see a lot of autos, we see a lot of vehicles with tinted windows, very dark tinted windows. They're illegal. Yet, I don't see that much enforcement. That's a good way to start, where if you have a checkpoint, any vehicle that has tinted windows, that has a license plate that's doctored, and by the way, we've been documenting many of these vehicles, and I would say almost 1 out of every 10 vehicles has a doctored plate, whether it's a paper plate from New Jersey or Texas, and it's expired, or the plate has been bent or painted over or whatever. But those are the individuals. First of all, you have just cause to stop. And if we have technology, and this is my question, do we have technology? I know it's been advancing that can recognize a firearm if it's present within a vehicle or around, within a certain amount of feet. Do we have that?
So I'm not sure. I know one of the things that the mayor has said in part of the blueprint is to try and evaluate whether these technologies exist.
Could you get the mic a little closer?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I know one of the things the mayor has mentioned is trying to explore any technology that would help us to find guns. Obviously, we'd have to do it in a manner that's constitutional and minimizes disruption. I'm not aware of anything.
Well, we had them over here in City Hall. They were out there a few weeks ago. They were just, they were, again, they're talking about putting them in schools where it wouldn't be a metal detector. You wouldn't have to go through a machine. But the technology, I just want to, you can find out from the NYPD if we're at least exploring that. So it would be less dangerous for police officers. They would know what they're dealing with right away, especially with a car with a tinted window.
Right, no, and I guess I meant, I wasn't aware of us currently deploying anything like that. To the extent it's out there, I think we're willing to check out any technology that'll help. I don't specifically know about that piece of technology, whether we're evaluating it, but I know we have a team of people who are always trying to see if there's any technology that can be helpful.
Right.
So, I mean, I could take that particular...
But I suggested this to the police commission, the last two police commissioners, that checkpoints actually do work, especially, I mean, if you, most of my, a good part of Queens, I can't speak for Staten Island or some of the other boroughs, but at night, you're trying to sleep, we hear cars racing around the community. And it's like the Indy 500. That's what it sounds like. You hear that, especially if you dare open your windows because it's a cool night, you're going to hear that. And I think, I'd rather have the checkpoints rather than, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, that we have them at 1 or 2 in the morning when a lot of these, these vehicles are racing around the community. And again, if you have dark tinted windows, you're hiding something. You're hiding something. Why would you want such dark windows? Nobody could see in. So that's what and they're illegal, but I don't see a crackdown. And that's what I think we need to get. Let's identify the vehicles first and see and then we go to the next step to have, check every vehicle. But I think we have to start and do a pilot program where we can get guns coming into this city somehow, where we have, where they're coming from, identify the vehicles, that, past arrest, and then let's move on from there, and let's go up the ladder. So we need a, obviously the plan needs to get more serious, actually. And I know you're not going to stop the flow of every gun that comes in. It's a never-ending battle, but we really have to try to make a big dent in this. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chairs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Brooks Powers, followed by Councilmember Ariola.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairs Hanks and Abreu, and our committee staff for convening today's joint hearing, and to the administration's representatives, advocates, and the public for joining us to discuss this critical and timely issue. I'm proud to join Chair Abreu and our other council colleagues as co-prime sponsor of Intro 518, which will require a report on the trafficking of illegal firearms. New Yorkers deserve streets free of violence, which is why we must do everything possible to address the gun violence epidemic. And this is especially true in light of yesterday's Supreme Court decision, which has eroded New York State's Sullivan Act and will decimate our ability to keep guns out of our public spaces and communities. We know that many guns come to the 5 boroughs via the Iron Pipeline, which illegally transports weapons, mainly from southern states, and enables unspeakable violence here at home. This bill will centralize the information we have on this pipeline and help this council determine how we can effectively curtail the flow of firearms into our communities. I'm looking forward to hearing the administration's perspective on Intro 518 specifically, and I have a few questions. This bill will require the collection of various data points about a given firearm, its location of origin, the way it came to the city, and so on. How does the administration currently track this data? And also, how does the NYPD, the Office to Prevent Gun Violence, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives currently coordinate with each other to keep track of the city's firearms? Does the offices see any potential obstacles in terms of complying with this reporting requirement? And it's my hope with this bill, which I think is a really good step in the right direction, that the data that can be collected from this can help to better inform policies and legislation to really combat the trafficking of illegal firearms here in New York City.
So I'll start and I'll turn it over to NYPD because I just want to make clear that the Office to Prevent Gun Violence does not track this data. OPGV is the deployment of crisis management systems and the solutions to how we work with community. MOCJ as a whole's policy and research team in 2017 did commission a study, and that study did find many similarities to what my colleagues at NYPD have said. You know, I do want to stress that that study did show that in qualitative studies, individuals that had been interviewed that were arrested for guns, that they reported getting their guns from diffuse places and diffuse mechanisms within communities, and that it noted that individuals that had ties to crews and or gang affiliations were much more likely to be able to get a community gun and not necessarily a specific trafficker, consistent with what my colleagues at NYPD have said. So that study had the median age, that it looked at the guns that NYPD interdicted between 2010 and 2015, and that study showed that the time at that time to crime was 12 years. So we're moving in a much faster direction as the colleagues at NYPD have pointed out. And so being able to kind of study that information also would probably be very helpful for the PD, for the city, and for the council to really start to understand how we can put resources where and what we can do to start really drilling down on this concern. With that, I'll give my colleagues PD.
Thank you. As far as how we get the data, we get the majority of the data from ATF. Some of the data elements are difficult to get, like the point of last sale is difficult because we don't always know that. How it was trafficked in is sometimes difficult because we don't always know or have that information. But for several years, we used to have access, or we still do have access to the E-Trace data system, which allows us to run any gun and see where it came from. And over the past few years, the ATF has just been giving us the data in its entirety, so we just can see all the data of recently recovered crime guns.
Can I just ask another question? Also, in looking at the murder and shooting data from 1990 to 2021, I'm interested in understanding from your perspective the trending in terms of murder versus shooting victims versus shooting incidents, and how do you think that this, or how do you see legislation such as Intro 518 being able to be a tool to address, interrupting this trend that we see? So right now, in 2021, we see that there were 488 murders, 1876 shooting victims, and 1561 shooting incidents, some of which, spiked to where it was in the early 2000s, essentially. So how do you see best use of this data to be able to inform the work that you all are doing, and do you have any recommendations of how we can strengthen it to really be impactful with this?
So just to follow up on the trends that you were talking about, one of the trends that we've seen is that 2/3 of our murders are by gun in 2020. In 2019, only half of our murders were by gun. So that, combined with the influx of firearms, definitely is troubling, because the increase in gun murders suggests that there's people out willing to carry guns and use them to a level that we had previously gotten away from. As far as using this data to help inform our work, the data always paints a picture of trafficking trends, and you can see changes in trends, and it directs us to inform our deployment of our Joint Firearms Task Force, our firearms investigation units, those units that work specifically on trafficking and creating barriers for guns to get into the city.
And so do you have someone in the department that regularly focuses on these trends specifically for the gun violence that's happening?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, chairs.
Thank you so much, Majority Whip Brooks Powers. That was an excellent question, by the way. Incredible. So before I would get into my second round, I would like to recognize Councilmember Botcher has joined us, and we do have a question from Councilmember Areola.
Yeah, I would like to just revisit the checkpoint issue, because I strongly support the checkpoints. The checkpoints that you are having, they're at ports of entry to New York, possibly from the states where these guns are coming from, correct? That's where you're focusing?
So, we do vehicle checkpoints as part of general law enforcement strategies. I think in terms of the guns, it's been more focused on actual intel based on where it's coming in to try to interdict rather than checkpoints necessarily. But obviously, we are doing some checkpoints in the city, and there's rules about how you do a checkpoint and how many cars you can stop, and it has to be very compliant with the rules that Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals have laid out over the years. But in terms of the guns, it's more intel-based, trying to find the guns coming in.
So you don't do checkpoints just as a matter of course, like we did with drunk driving and checkpoints at holiday weekends, and that certainly brought the number of people who were driving drunk to a lesser percentage. We have each, in our districts, have had gun violence where people have lost their lives because someone had an illegal firearm. And we have lots of bridges, and we have lots of tunnels, and we have lots of ways to get in and out of our city. And it is not wrong to really kind of pump up the checkpoint aspect of of, trying to stop illegal firearms from pouring into our city. If, as Councilmember Holden mentioned, a lot of, if you don't have a firearm in your car, it's really not an issue if you're stopped, if you don't have anything to hide. But there are so many things that are plaguing our city. Like he said, the cars that have the paper plates, cars that have those popping from their mufflers, and illegal firearms. There was a fatality just last weekend in my district, and the video shows it all, that it was a firearm used to take the life of someone who was from another state, but was here. So I just think that if we're not aggressively battling this at the ports of entry to our state, then we're never going to get ahead of it. We'll always be behind it. We have to be proactive and not reactive. Yes, we get intel, but we also have to be out there making the arrests, making sure that this trafficking is stopped. And I know that there are laws that guide this, but nothing should come before the safety of the people who live in this city and this state, and it is something that plagues the entire state, and I commend you on the work that you're doing now. The fact that the mayor's gun blueprint against gun violence has really incorporated a task force-like committee, like the people assembled here today, I applaud that. But I think if we really focus on getting the guns before they get into the hands of the wrong people, we're just going to have more lives lost. But thank you for the work you've done so far.
Thank you, Chair Ariola. Excuse me, it's Councilmember Ariola. So my next line of questioning is really for Mark J. When the mayor announced his blueprint, he included social and community component and declared need for a citywide approach to meet this challenge. One of my questions is with, the launch of ONS, MAP, do you find that these programs are distributed equitably by borough and actually throughout the city? We know that there's 30 neighborhood safety teams throughout the city. We'd like to know what is being done to make sure that we're all speaking to each other.
Thank you, Chair Hanks. The OPGV and MAP use very specific criteria to determine geographic areas for expansion and for sightings. So the criteria include data on gun violence, quality of life data, and input from local partners. Mm-hmm. And we work with the Office of Management and Budget to determine the available funds and appropriate funding levels, as well as obviously talking to electeds and community leaders about where resources should be cited. And we'll continue to be open to having those conversations going forward.
Yes, you know that's my my whole
Always.
goal is communication, and education. And so what do you think you could be doing better as far as the liaising between Cure Violence, NYPD, community stakeholders, Cure Violence? How are we really incorporating and using this data to make sure that we are laser focused on problem areas to prevent future gun violence episodes in the city?
So the teams make sure that they are in constant communication with NYPD. We are also in constant communication with community leaders. Mm-hmm. All of the initiative managers are getting data. They get information from NYPD. That information is then passed on to the relevant sites, and those sites then begin to mobilize activations of spaces, especially where there has been a shooting, mm-hmm. as well as the proactive, making sure that if we know that there are issues where potential retaliation is ripe for occurrence, that the partners in that neighborhood that have the trust and that have the relationships are going out to start to mediate those conflicts and de-escalate the levels of animosity that one finds there that can unfortunately lead to shootings and tragic events.
Yeah, so we're looking at, thank you for that, we're looking at higher rates, especially with young people. The ages have gotten younger, And so, particularly in Staten Island, a lot of our active shooters are between the ages of 14 and 17. However, a lot of the programs are still targeted to 18 to 24. So what are we doing to kind of, adapt and, really looking at the demographic that may be changing, and how are we changing with that?
So at MOCJ, we actually started looking at the median age of the demographics, and I'd actually like our Karina Christensen, who works with Atlas, which is very specific to individuals, to kind of talk about what that looks like.
Thank you.
You have to come to the mic.
Should I be?
You were sworn in already.
I was sworn in already, okay. Okay, so just looking at the last 3 years of supplementary homicide data, we could see that the median age of a fatal shooting victim was 29 years old. And for those incidents, sure. So the median age was 29 years old of a victim of a fatal shooting between 2019 and 2021. And when there was a perpetrator identified, their median age was about 27 or 28 years old over that period of time. The issue is that there's such a large volume, so you do see that range across very, very young to also folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s. There's just quite a large range. And so what we aim to do at ONS and at MOCJ is to provide comprehensive solutions that are targeted and specific to people in different age ranges who have a lot of different concerns, a lot of different situations that they're being responsive to. Atlas in particular has very targeted, specific, evidence-based therapeutic services that are have demonstrated to reduce violence for the 13 to 22-year-old age range, and we are actively working with YCOs to identify youth and community, 13, 14, 15 years old, to be able to get really strong evidence-based and family, holistic therapeutic services to those young people.
Thank you. Can you drill down a little bit more on what kind of programming? Because as someone who used to do youth development, we're still looking at the 18 to 24. We know what the statistics that you're talking about is that the shooting victims are actually, even going up to 30. And so we're not really seeing that reflected in the RFP process when it comes to organizations going out for that funding. Are there requirements that the open line of communication, is that in as a condition of award? So how are we really making sure that each of these individual organizations or groups that we're saying, okay, you're going to deal with the 13 to 16 or 17 to 24, how is that being reflected? Because I don't see it, and the conversations that we're having with law enforcement and Cure Violence, they're saying something very different. They're saying that the lines of communication are not as they should be, and that young people, their journey through, even if they're adjudicated and they're within the criminal justice system, we're really not meeting those marks. So, as to Ms. Logan's testimony, it's great. I mean, it all looks great on paper, but I think what this committee wants to do is really drill down on what does that look like on the ground, and how do we as council members make sure that the folks in our communities are taking advantage of these programs, and we know that the age ranges have been changed. So I know that's a lot, but.
I can speak to, so there are different models that are responsive to people in different phases of their lives, and it's really important that there's not a one-size-fits-all anti-violence program. So we have at MOCJ within ONS, but also within our other programs, our reentry programs, our ATI programs, a range of models that are responsive to people's life stage and also their situation and their level of risk. So Atlas in particular was designed for people with very elevated risk of violent reoffense who are in the pretrial period specifically. And we have models that we are rolling out that are age specific. FFT is our family-based model. That's really for 13 to up to 22. And we are also this year bringing online a CBT plus employment program that's for adults 22 and older that really go to that 25, 30, 35 age range. Because when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you need different kinds of economic support to be able to access those programs. You need guaranteed jobs, you need training, you need social support. And that's really different than what the kinds of economic or educational supports that a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old might need. So our work has been all about how do we connect the resources across our office, because we have these touch points in every different place. And so we're just working together to figure out how do we refer really tight within our own networks. How do we work with many of the same organizations? So many of our CMS partners are also ATI partners, are also Atlas partners. And so there's just so much opportunity for stronger coordination and integration of our resources, and we're working really hard on that.
And just in terms of how we are strengthening communication, so as Ms. Christensen just pointed out, across the office, right? So MOCJ is, yes, O&S, but there's a suite of services. We have pretrial services, we have alternatives to incarceration, we have reentry. All of that work, we have contracted with a hub that is called Unite Us. And Unite Us has a referral system, right? So all of our partners are able to go into this database, and they're able to put it and say, I have a client that is X years old, that is gender non-binary, that is in need of this service. And how do I now get this service? Because we provide addiction services, but my client also needs mental health, additional mental health strengths. All of that information is within that hub, and now our providers and our partners can go in and they can pull that information. Additionally, we know that that hub has acquired the entity that DOHMH, Health and Hospitals, also used for their referral system, and so now it will be even a stronger connectivity of referrals and services and knowledge across partners.
I appreciate that, and that will definitely be a lot of good information for a different type of hearing that we plan on having, because it's a lot that we need to digest and make sure the public understands how we are working in tandem, you know, because this is the solution-based and these are the issues. And so I really appreciate your testimonies today. I appreciate your commitment, NYPD's commitment to the safety of our city, and I appreciate everything that you've said here today. I just want to pass it off to my colleague, Council Member Botcher, and then back to Chair Abreu.
Thank you so much. Good morning. The bipartisan gun control package that was passed in the Senate last night includes $8 billion for mental health and school-based programs. Have your agencies been involved in any discussion about how that money might be spent in New York City? Do you know what the decision process will be to spend that money in New York City, and how do you think it should be spent, the $8 billion as part of the gun control package that was passed last night in the Senate?
Yeah. So I mean, I think my understanding of the federal process is this would now be grant money that they would have to assign, and localities and states throughout the country would apply for a certain amount of grant money. And obviously, I think whether within the NYPD or other city agencies applying for that money, I think would probably be something we would do as a city. Whenever, I forget off the top of my head which agency is in charge of it, but whatever agency is in charge of it, we'll put out, here are the details, here's what we have to use for, here's what we want to know, and localities would have to apply for it. And there's probably a lot of ways that it can be used, whether with us or Be Heard or some other mental health programming in the city.
So when it comes to the federal grant money, a lot of times what happens is sometimes it will be given directly to the state, and then the state will allocate resources and work with us as a locality to basically implement the programming. In other instances, we, MOCJ, have had grant money that comes to us. For example, we have a partnership in Brownsville that deals with domestic violence and guns, right? And we're one of 9 entities that has been looking at that information and working with national partners on that. When it comes to mental health concerns, we at MOCJ have been expanding just how we are looking at behavioral health. Just this week, we were in the Bronx with the Bronx DAs and all of and a conglomeration of mental health professionals across the city, looking at ways that we can strengthen not only the communication that Chair Hanks talked about, but also where we're falling down in gaps, right? One of the areas we identified with all of those partners is just the supports for families in terms of education. When you listen to some of the stories, a lot of individuals that have ended up into the criminal justice continuum end up because family members do not have the understanding and the bandwidth to access the resources that are available. And so part of what we've done, especially in Atlas with family functional therapy, is trying to make sure that we build up that foundation and support network. And in terms of where we could invest more resources, that would be some of the areas, because as we have been saying, it takes more than just enforcement. It takes everybody together working collectively. And if you build up the family network, you have now strengthened a much bigger arm of individuals that can be working for those that have been affected by serious mental health issues, that can divert them and support getting them into the appropriate services and not into the criminal justice network.
Absolutely. The way the Senate has allocated the money, it's $3 billion for mental health clinics and school-based mental health care, $2 billion for school safety initiatives, and then also grants for mental health training and pediatricians and mental health awareness programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'll wrap up with another 2 set of questions. Going back to Intro 518, to what extent is the city currently in possession of the information sought in the proposed legislation?
So, I mean, I think we have some of it through our investigations. I'm not sure going point by point, but like some of it would certainly be information that we get through our investigations. And I just want to stress, like, we support the goals of your bill. We think more information is great. It's, we look forward to working with you, your committee council, the law department, the mayor's office on how to best do this with the constraints that we have with federal law on what we can report.
No, I appreciate I appreciate the synergy. I think there will be synergy. I just want to be able to get on the record what is the information that is sought by legislation that you currently have in your possession. If you don't have it in front of you, it's the type of gun, the manufacturer, the importer, the dealer of the firearm, the date the firearm was last sold, whether the firearm is registered, whether the firearm is a ghost gun or 3D printed, the firearm's point of entry into the city, a review of the ways firearms are illegally transported into the city. Those are just about like some of the few things. I want to know to what extent you have that information already to help enhance our negotiations.
So we have a lot of those. Things that stood out to me was the date the firearm was last sold.
The crime? Or?
Well, we have the first sale, but sometimes there's multiple sales in between the first sale and the ultimate crime, so that's always a limitation. So that's one of the biggest issues that I can see.
And would access to this information sought in the proposed legislation, do you believe that would benefit the NYPD's investigation of firearm trafficking?
The access to that information? Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And a firearm seized by NYPD, to the extent you have this information on hand, what percentage of such weapons were used in a separate crime beyond mere possession? That makes sense?
So I don't have the percentages here, but in 2021, of the guns we recovered, like 579 had a connection with, murder or non-negligent homicide, 253 with drugs, 299 with robbery, 108 with felony assault, and it goes down from there. So there's some percentage that it is. The vast majority is possession itself, which is a little over 4,000 was that. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then,
I want to be clear. This is data that the gun was connected with the arrest for those things. Some of the guns may have been connected with robberies or shootings that the data doesn't show here.
Got it. Okay. So that's only connection to the crime for which the arrests.
Right. So it's an arrest for robbery and a gun was recovered with it. That's the data it's showing.
And just to go back to some of the things that were raised earlier, we mentioned how the guns are tracked through the serial numbers. How do you track ghost guns, since for the most part they don't have serial numbers? I know that there was a final rule that came out by the administration Biden in April that would require that serial numbers be used for the kits. I guess that's my question. How do you track ghost guns?
So our intelligence division is responsible for that. They've put out training to everybody in the field to be on the lookout for these types of guns. And anytime they make an arrest of this sort, they get notified, and the intelligence division, they're the experts at this. They verify that it is indeed a ghost gun, and then we start recording it as a ghost gun.
But
Is there any specific character trait? I mean, I guess it's just a part, right? Once you get it, is that how you determine? That's how you track it? Or?
yeah, it's mostly the lack of a serial number. And in terms of tracking it, we could track how many we've recovered, but tracking where it came from without the serial number, I mean, that's one of the issues with ghost guns. It becomes impossible if you print it in a 3D printer or you got one of those gun manufacturer kits. I know the state has, in terms of guns sold within the state, the gun manufacturers now have to put a serial number on it. But that's New York State, right? That's a tiny percentage of where they're coming from.
Got it. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. And you were mentioning that there are a lot of guns coming from the Iron Pipeline. Is there any individual collaboration with the city of New York, with other states or other cities along the Iron Pipeline to help reduce the trafficking, to your knowledge? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of our, the 9-state consortium, which I guess is more the end location of the guns from the Iron Pipeline, but we've been working with them to try and, figure out ways to stop it.
Is there a specific city or state you're working with?
New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont. But yeah, we have meetings.
So
with
Vermont
them.
is part of the I-95?
They're part of the end using.
Got it. So I guess I shouldn't so narrowly think about the Iron Pipeline just being the I-95. Are there places outside of the I-95 route that you've seen guns coming from?
Well, yeah.
Huge numbers or concentrations?
Well, Ohio and Pennsylvania both are big contributors. They're in the top 10. I'm not sure if the last in 2021, but Ohio makes the top 10. And, obviously they're coming through other routes too.
Thank you. And with respect to the recent slew of legislation that just passed in the federal government, just last night, I believe, on the bipartisan bill, I know that you may have not had time to review it. I myself haven't seen it entirely. But if you could, based on what you know, what impact do you think that you anticipate that to have on our ability to address gun violence or, the interstate flow of guns as well?
I think, as Councilmember Botcher mentioned, there's a lot of funding there that will be helpful, not just on the mental health with the red flag laws. There's an increased background check for those under 21, so there'll have to be an increased background check. They closed a bit of a loophole on domestic violence where boyfriends who committed domestic violence could still legally be eligible for a gun, where under federal law, if you have a domestic violence conviction for spouses, then you're prohibited. One big thing I think that will happen, and I don't believe this has passed the House of Representatives yet, but it's, the Senate's obviously the big hurdle, is they increased the amount of people who have to register as federal firearm license dealers. And I think that's big because a lot of the record keeping and background checks come from sales through the federal firearms licensees, whereas when it was individual sales, there's no background check in much of the country. There's no record of it. So it didn't totally close that, but there were people whose main job isn't selling guns, but were making a lot of money selling guns, who didn't qualify under the old rule of a federal firearms licensee, which under this, it appears they will. So I think those are some of the big provisions.
Yeah, that's great. So there was one state bill that passed that expands categories of people who may file extreme risk protection order petitions on red flag laws, right? What measures is NYPD already taking with regard to red flag laws?
So that is something we are certainly talking about, and I think when the initial red flag laws passed, we had a pretty big discretion with the good cause, so I don't think they were filed very much, but that law increases our responsibility to file the ERPO applications, and that's something we're trying to figure out how to operationalize at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We were both looking at the same article that said exactly what you did. Are there any budgetary implications for law enforcement to start looking at these new U.S. Senate laws that they passed, the red flag?
The Senate laws, I don't know. I mean, other than getting hopefully some money from the federal government, I don't think it's going to have a big budgetary impact. The ERPO laws, I think, will have a pretty big increase on the amount of applications we have to file, and I think that might have a budget. Well, that will definitely have a budgetary impact.
Right.
And I don't know that we know exactly how to accomplish it yet, but it really pretty significantly increased some of what we're required to do, and we're working on how many we're going to have to file based on this, and it could be a lot, and then what staffing we need in order to do it.
Yeah, this is the start of an ongoing conversation, of course, because we're still trying to wrap our heads around what that means, and so I don't know if you have any immediate comments about it, but what do you think legislatively the New York State and the City Council can do to help mitigate some of these, what this new law means, and how we can be of service to figure out how to make sure that we're keeping all New Yorkers safe through local laws, resolutions, and working with our colleagues in the state?
Yeah, I think so especially after the Supreme Court ruling, there's going to be some work for the state to, I think they're going to come back and do some legislation. I think to a degree, what we can then do on the city level depends a little bit on what they decide to do on the state level, if there's any gaps that we would have to fill. But I think that's something we'd like to be in contact with you.
Yeah, we have already opened lines of communication with our colleagues in the state, and so we are working lockstep to do that analysis to figure out where the gaps are, and that, as Mr. Clark said, will drive how we as a city are able to then move and what we will be coming back to work with council on.
Thank you. I look forward to having that conversation. I do have a question from my colleague, Councilmember Holden.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is for Mock J. Neighborhood stat. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like, do you get young people, like teens, on neighborhood stat?
Yes, and the quick answer is yes. The neighborhood stat brings together community members and partners. The activities of how to empower communities usually are interactive events that have vignettes, so people come out in numbers to put in pieces of paper in, here are all of the things that you as a community have told us needs to be done. Now participatory voting, tell us how you want to spend the funds of the money that's available. and young people are participating in that work.
But is, here specifically though, there's mention about guns and the harm they could do, or, you know, because I think if you go around it, if you don't really address it directly, the message could be lost. For instance, in the late 70s, way before your time, they had a program called Scared Straight. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Where Scared Straight was where inmates would go and talk to teens that were getting into trouble, and actually tell them what it's really like in prison. Tell them, like, you know, what's going on in jails. Like, you don't want to go down that road. It won awards as a documentary in, I guess, 1978 or 79, but there was some question of whether it worked. And what I think that sometimes the teens that get involved, you know, they're part of a gang, or they feel like they're part of a family of friends, and they get involved in violence without realizing the ramifications, the results, without actually seeing what happens when guns are fired and what it looks like when it hits someone. And the aftermath of violence. And I don't know if that, you know, again, I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't know what works, but I just wonder if many of these programs, if they're not directly related to the actual gun violence itself, how it destroys families, individuals, people, how, you know, the sadness it causes. If we don't ever show the graphic aftermath, because that can scare people to say, you know what, that's horrendous. I didn't know. It's, you know, firing a gun, what happens? So the programs, that's my question here, is do you get into really the aftermath of what it does to, you know, what gun violence causes?
So I do think that one of the benefits of the programming, and not specifically NSTAT, right? Because NSTAT is more of a community, how are we making our community safer? But when you're talking about gun violence and you're talking about targeting the youth that are gun adjacent, per se, those are the individuals that are doing internships with credible messengers and cure violence sites. So they are intimately aware of what happens when families have been impacted by the loss of a loved one. And they are working with those violence interrupters who are going out to de-escalate conflict, because they intimately know now how that has not only impacted the individual family, but how it completely is destroying and wrecking their community, and how they now have to take ownership of their lives as well as their civic responsibility in the community to stop that violence.
Right, thank you. That sounds good, thank you.
Thank you so much. So that concludes questioning from the council. And now I will pass it off to Mr. Josh Kingsley. Thank you so much for all your help in putting this together. And they will take public testimony.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll now turn to the public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that unlike a council typical hearing, we'll be hearing individuals testify one by one. Today we're going to be hearing from two panelists on Zoom. If anyone else is present and wants to testify, please make yourself known. So for public testimony, we'll start with Jackie Gazjijian, followed by Katie Adams.
Starting time.
Jackie, go ahead. Thank you.
Starting time.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Gazdiggy, and I'm a senior policy counsel with Brooklyn Defender Services. And I've been a public defender for 12 years. I want to thank the council for holding this hearing and providing our organization with an opportunity to testify today. Brooklyn Defender Services is concerned about the possibility of increased funding for surveillance programs, using the pretext that this will put an end to gun violence in New York City. New York City has already invested more than $1 billion in a 20-year surveillance infrastructure program building. The city is blanketed in surveillance, and no police department in the country has more military-grade surveillance resources than NYPD. These tools, already heavily invested in and deployed, did nothing to stop or ameliorate the claimed spike in violence in the first place. All they have accomplished is to expand a burgeoning surveillance state, repeatedly infringing on New Yorkers' dignity, privacy, and First Amendment freedoms. Instead, the city should act now to rein in the NYPD's development and use of surveillance technologies. We can take ShotSpotter technology as an example, which is specific to guns. New York City has been using ShotSpotter technology since 2015. In 2021, after an independent investigation conducted by journalists and academics, the Chicago Office of Inspector General's Public Safety Section acted on the reported inquiry and data and conducted an investigation into the accuracy and deployment of the ShotSpotter system in the city of Chicago. The Chicago OIG concluded from its analysis that the Chicago Police Department responses to ShotSpotter alerts can seldom be shown to lead to investigatory stops, which might have investigative value and rarely produce evidence of a gun-related crime. Instead, we're asking the City Council to consider reallocating resources away from putative responses to alleged gang membership and instead redirect these resources toward interventions that have proven effective in reducing violence and other unlawful activity. Specifically, we advocate for an increase in funding for community centers, high quality and engaging programming, and organizations using the Cure Violence model, which we've already heard testimony about today. Another issue we'd like to flag for your committees is the lack of post-arrest programming available for those charged with illegal gun possession in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, you have primarily only two available alternative to incarceration or ATI programs: Youth and Congregations in Partnership, which is known as YCP, and Project Redirect. Both are run by the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And when I say available programs, I mean programs accepted by the DA as an alternative to incarceration for a gun possession case. Because as I will discuss in more detail shortly, DA consent is required because of harsh mandatory minimum sentences for gun possession. As of now, both YCP and Project Redirect are currently suspended and are no longer being offered as an ATI by the Kings County District Attorney's Office for anyone charged with gun possession. That means there's currently no available programming or ATIs for those that are charged with gun possession in New York City, in Brooklyn specifically. The Brooklyn DA announced recently that he plans to launch a restorative justice program to stop shootings. But even this program, being touted as a first of its kind program, is not an alternative to incarceration. And Eric Gonzalez specifically stressed that participants will be those without pending matters before his office. Since its enactment, New York's firearm licensing laws
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, have resulted in discriminatory policing and criminalization of Black and brown people living in urban low-income communities. As public defenders, we represent thousands of people each year, the vast majority of whom are young Black men who face years in prison, not for firing a gun or committing an act of violence, but for simply possessing a gun. When someone in New York City is prosecuted for possessing an unlicensed firearm, they are routinely charged with second-degree criminal possession of a weapon, a violent felony punishable by 3.5 to 15 years in prison. Prison is mandatory even if the person has no record and has never been arrested before. Increasing prison sentences has not proven to reduce gun violence, and the overuse of arrests for unlicensed gun possession is yet another method to target and incarcerate Black and brown New Yorkers, branding them criminals and violent felons for life. We ask the council, the mayor, and the governor to take a hard look at what has not worked in the past. Incarcerating generations of Black and brown New Yorkers through rigid and harsh mandatory minimum sentencing is not a solution to ending gun violence in this city. Any effort to meaningfully reduce gun violence, yes,
we have to wrap it up. You're going way over, all right? So just wrap it up, please.
Yes. Over surveillance and mass incarceration are clearly not the answer, because we've been deploying both these authoritarian and punitive measures for decades, and there is still violence in our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Next, we'll turn to Katie Adams, followed by Julian Melendi. Katie, you may go ahead online.
Starting time.
Hello. Hi. I don't have a fancy or formal written down speech, but I am a mom in the Bronx in District 10, and I have 2 girls going to a public school, PS 24. I'm going to get right to it. So to get answers about how to change the current NYC DOE policy where public school front doors cannot be locked from the outside during the school day when the kids are in school, I've spoken with a million people and gotten no answers. All the way up from Hochul's office, unanswered emails and calls to the mayor, the governor, FDNY headquarters. I have, through kind people who didn't know the answer but would spend a few minutes with me on the phone, I've realized that everybody tells me that I'm not going to get the answers I need because it goes all the way to the top. Obviously, I can't get Hochul or Adams on the phone myself, so we, as parents, clearly need elected leaders to get the right people's attention to affect change. I promised myself after I heard Kimberly Rubio, the Uvalde mom who lost her daughter Lexi, talk about somewhere out there a mom is hearing our testimony and thinking to herself, I can't imagine their pain, not knowing that our reality will one day be hers unless we act now. I promised myself no matter how many calls and things I needed to do, it's my goal to get this NYC DOE policy changed. I have done a bunch of research, looked at other states, what they do. As we know, a lot of Catholic, private, charter schools have locked front doors and buzzer camera systems. This isn't insane in 2022. All public schools are not permitted to shut and lock their front door while the children are in school. Many of the doors now have locking mechanisms that can be, or features added. It's called a dogging feature. I'm not going to get into it because it'll take too much time. Panic hardware bars that are installed already now, the doors that open from the inside so all the kids, say in an emergency, can run out. From the outside, some doors may be able to be locked from the outside at the same time as still being able to be opened for an egress door in an emergency from the inside. But those answers I have not been able to find or get anybody to talk to me about what hardware is on the door now, etc. There are Knox boxes. I have all this information. I'm happy if you put in a chat or something where I can send this information. We had a PTA meeting. Superintendent Hulla forwarded the information to David English. Superintendent Hulla has taken a little bit of a vested interest and at least passed the information on about knock boxes. Knock boxes are a secure key vault, like 14,000 schools and government buildings use these. They're basically like a firebox you would see on an outside of a residence. These are super tough industrial. They can be affixed to the outside of a school that's already existing. It's put into the mortar. Knox, K-N-O-X box, is a secure key vault that is installed on the exterior of a building near the main entrance. This box contains building keys to provide access for fire department and in situations where there is an emergency. Knox boxes, basically Knox, KNOX.com. I spoke to the company, I got prices. They cost, if one of the other council members, if what they said is true, if the new bill that they just signed gives $2 billion in school safety, these dual lock boxes, one side is for fire, one side is for police. They cost $876 plus shipping. They could be put on all the public schools, in the US, there's 98,755. That comes to 86 million and change. That is 4.3 of the $2 billion school safety budget. I don't think that's too much to ask. The public schools kids needs to be just as safe as charter, private, Catholic. Any building in the city that you have to buzz in, which is a lot of our buildings we go into work, our kids need the same. I often drive up to my school building and the door is wide open. We live in a beautiful community and I would love to have front doors open, but it's no longer safe. The parents in our school feel the same. I know many across the country do. So I have information I can pass on to anybody that can use it and help us get some answers. And I know this involves getting buzzer camera systems. I'm not afraid to ask stupid questions. So I don't know if it's as easy as doing these knock boxes and then getting the Ring doorbell for the front desk or the office to buzz people in, or have the security guard who we have, who is unarmed, able to, if the office says, yes, this person's fine, then the security guard could open the door. We just need to do better for our public school kids because it's not safe.
Thank you so much. We have one question.
Yes. Hi, Katie. My name's Councilmember Joanne Ariola. I represent the 32nd Council District in Queens, and I'm here with another panel member for this committee, Representative Bob Holden from the 30th. And we both held meetings with the members of the Chancellor's office, our principals from our local schools, the superintendents, and we are trying to come to a very much what you're saying, come to some type of agreement with the DOE where kids can be safe inside and outside of school, because we're seeing just too much school violence right now, and it's becoming an epidemic, and too many children are losing their lives. So we at the council are hearing you, and we are having conversations to try to put in place exactly what you're saying. So thank you.
Is there any way I can get you the information?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that the Committee on Public Safety will be hosting a school safety hearing in the fall. So we will definitely be inviting you to come out, and because I believe that school safety should have its own hearing.
Yes.
And everything that you're saying is definitely appropriate for that time. So we really thank you for all your activism and your concern to keeping our young people safe. But we will be in touch about the public school safety hearing in the fall, which should be in September.
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak.
Of course. So I believe that concludes.
We have one more person.
We have one more person? Okay. Apologies.
Thank you, everyone. Next, we'll hear from Julian Melendi. Julian, you may go ahead.
Hello? Great. Good morning. My name is Julian Melendi, and I'm a summer associate with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, which fights for New Yorkers' privacy against discriminatory surveillance. I'm also a fellow at the Arthur Lyman Center for Public Interest Law at Yale Law School and the Information Society Project at Yale Law School. As gun violence continues to devastate our nation, New York, other states, and the federal government must avoid error-prone, bias, and invasive pseudoscience police technology that is being marketed as the solution to gun violence. Historically, the NYPD has used public safety crises as an excuse to deploy novel and highly invasive surveillance technologies, ultimately undermining public safety and democracy itself. One alarming example is the NYPD's contract with ShotSpotter. The system uses microphones to listen for gunshots, but it sometimes fails to differentiate between muzzle blasts, cars backfiring, and construction noise. ShotSpotter alerts bring police to neighborhoods looking for active shooters, increasing the risk of police shootings in over-policed Black and Latinx communities where ShotSpotter installations are concentrated. Another technology is Evolve, a high-end metal detector company that has gained the national spotlight after some recent shootings. However, the metal detectors are error-prone. They can't reliably tell the difference between a gun and a cell phone or an umbrella. In fact, when a school in Illinois tested Evolve scanners, Chromebook laptops prompted alerts 60 to 70% of the time. It's no surprise that Evolve's own marketing materials admit that they only flag a confirmed threat 0.8% of the time. This council must look skeptically at any new NYPD surveillance purchases and hold the agency to account for past practices. In June 2020, Stop and our partners worked with the council to enact the Public Oversight of Surveillance Technology, or POST Act, requiring the NYPD to publicly report its surveillance technology usage, but the NYPD has systematically failed to comply. Every day, the NYPD continues to flout this council and the rule of law, ignoring requirements that you and your predecessors passed to reaffirm community control over police surveillance. I urge you in the strongest possible terms to hold an oversight hearing on this matter and the NYPD's brazen breach of the POST Act. When the city adopts fancy technology in the name of public safety, it wastes money and hurts BIPOC residents. In this dire moment, when gun violence is worse than ever, we must turn toward evidence-based solutions that do not infringe on the privacy rights and fuel the mass surveillance apparatus. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. With that, thank you so much. Thank you for NYPD, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, Josh Kingsley, and my colleagues for participating in this very important hearing, and this meeting is adjourned.